The Galactic Council had been at war with the Vrethani Empire for 17 long cycles. Every species in the Council had sent their best soldiers, their most advanced weapons, and their most brilliant commanders. Yet the war dragged on, with neither side able to claim true victory. That was until the humans arrived. Commander Xylox of the Mithrani Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with all four of his eyes. The humans had only joined the Council 2 cycles ago, and already they had proven themselves to be the most terrifying warriors the galaxy had ever seen. They came from a planet called Earth, a world so dangerous that most species could not survive on its surface for more than a few hours. The humans called it home. Today, Xylox was observing a joint operation. A mixed force of Council species was about to assault a Vrethani colony world called Thuris Prime. The planet held strategic value, and the Council needed to capture it. 3 human companies had been assigned to support the main assault force. "The humans are ready, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a slender Corvani with scales that shimmered blue in the bridge lighting. "They are requesting permission to begin their drop." Xylox nodded slowly. He had seen humans in combat before. It was not something he wanted to see again, but he understood its necessity. Permission granted. May the stars guide them. The human dropships fell from orbit like burning meteors. Inside one of those ships, Sergeant Major Elena Rodriguez checked her weapon for the 15th time. Around her sat the men and women of Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion. They were quiet, focused, ready. 2 minutes to landing, announced the pilot over the intercom. Enemy anti-air is heavy, going to be a rough ride. Rodriguez looked at her soldiers. They were young, most of them. Private Chen was only 19, fresh from training. Corporal Okonkwo had seen one deployment before this one, but they were humans, born on a Deathworld, raised in an environment that would kill most aliens in minutes. The ship shook as enemy fire struck the hull. Sparks flew from a panel above Rodriguez's head, but the dropship held together. Human engineering was as tough as the people who built it. 1 minute. Rodriguez stood up, grabbing the overhead rail for support. "Listen up. Our objective is the Eastern Industrial Sector. We secure it, we hold it until the main force arrives. Simple mission, people. Watch your corners, watch your backs, and watch out for each other. Are we clear?" "Clear, Sergeant Major," came the unified response. The ship hit the ground hard. The ramp dropped and Rodriguez was the first one out, her boots hitting alien soil. The air smelled strange, but her helmet filtered it automatically. Around her, the industrial sector sprawled in every direction, massive factories, storage facilities, and worker housing blocks. The first Vrethani defenders appeared within seconds. They were tall creatures, nearly 3 meters in height, with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. Their weapons fired bolts of superheated plasma that could melt through most armor. Most armor, not human armor. Rodriguez raised her rifle and fired. The high-velocity round punched through the Vrethani soldier's chest, and the creature fell. More humans poured from the dropship, spreading out in practiced formations. The battle for Thuris Prime had begun. For 3 hours, the fighting was intense. The Vrethani defenders fought hard, using every advantage they had. They knew the terrain, they had prepared defenses, and they outnumbered the human forces nearly 10 to 1. It did not matter. The humans advanced steadily, clearing building after building. They moved like water flowing around obstacles, filling every gap in the enemy lines. When they took casualties, they kept fighting. When they ran low on ammunition, they scavenged from the fallen. When their weapons failed, they used their hands. By midday, the Eastern Industrial Sector was secure. Rodriguez stood in the central square of the sector, breathing hard. Her armor was scorched in 3 places where plasma bolts had struck, but she was alive. Around her, her soldiers were setting up defensive positions, expecting the Vrethani counterattack that was sure to come. That was when Private Chen called out, "Sergeant Major, you need to see this." Rodriguez jogged over to where Chen was standing, near the entrance to a large building that looked like some kind of community center. The young private's face was pale, visible through his visor. "What is it, Chen?" Chen pointed inside. "Civilians, Sergeant Major, hundreds of them." Rodriguez stepped through the door and stopped. The building was packed with Vrethani civilians, workers, families, children. They huddled together in fear, their large eyes reflecting the harsh light from Rodriguez's helmet lamp. Some of the children were crying, a strange keening sound that touched something deep in her chest. These were the enemy. The Vrethani Empire had attacked Council worlds, killed Council citizens, started a war that had claimed millions of lives. And now here were their families, their young ones, completely helpless and completely terrified. Rodriguez's radio crackled. "Bravo Company, this is Command. We have detected Vrethani civilians in your sector. Standard protocol applies. Detain and process for interrogation. Some may have useful intelligence." Rodriguez looked at the civilians. One of the adults, probably a female based on the secondary markings Rodriguez had learned to recognize, was holding two small children close to her body. She was shaking, clearly expecting death. "Understood, Command," Rodriguez replied. "Beginning civilian processing now." She switched to her company channel. "All squad leaders report to my position. We have a situation." Within minutes, her senior NCOs and officers had gathered. Lieutenant Park, her commanding officer, was the first to speak. "What's the situation, Sergeant Major?" Rodriguez gestured to the building. "Approximately 300 Vrethani civilians, sir, mostly workers and families, a lot of children." Park looked inside and his expression hardened, not with hatred but with something else, determination. "Command wants them processed for interrogation." "Yes, sir." Park was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again. "These people didn't start this war. They're just living their lives, working in factories, raising their kids, same as people back home." "Yes, sir," Rodriguez agreed. "We're soldiers, not monsters." Park turned to face his NCOs. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to protect these civilians. We're going to make sure they have food, water, and medical attention if they need it. And when the main force arrives, we're going to hand them over safely with a full record of humane treatment." Corporal Okonkwo spoke up. "Sir, Command might not like that. The Vrethani haven't exactly been gentle with our prisoners." Park's jaw tightened. "I know what the Vrethani have done. I've seen the footage from Kalos Station. But we're not them. We're humans. We came from a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we survived by working together, by protecting each other, by being better than our worst instincts. That's what makes us strong. That's what makes us human." He looked around at his soldiers. Anyone disagree? No one spoke. "Good, Sergeant Major, begin humanitarian operations. Let's show these people what humans are really made of." Rodriguez nodded and began issuing orders. Food was shared from their emergency rations. Water purification tablets were distributed. Medical supplies were used to treat the wounded and sick among the civilians. The Vrethani watched in confusion and growing wonder. They had been told that the humans were monsters, savage creatures from a hell world who killed without mercy. They had expected death. Instead, they received kindness. The counterattack came just before sunset. The Vrethani military, desperate to reclaim the sector and rescue their civilians, launched a massive assault. Artillery rained down on the human positions. Thousands of Vrethani soldiers advanced through the industrial district, their weapons blazing. And the humans held. They held because they had something to protect now. Not just a strategic objective, not just a piece of ground, but hundreds of innocent lives. They fought with a fury that shocked even their own commanders, throwing back wave after wave of enemy attacks. When the night finally fell and the Vrethani assault broke, Rodriguez stood on the barricade and watched the enemy retreat. Her armor was battered, her ammunition nearly exhausted, her body aching in a dozen places. But behind her, in the community center, 300 Vrethani civilians were still alive. And that, she thought, was what it meant to be human. The news of what happened on Thuris Prime spread quickly, first through the military channels, then through the civilian networks, and finally to the Galactic Council itself. The story was remarkable: human soldiers protecting enemy civilians, risking their lives for people who should have been their enemies. Commander Xylox reviewed the battle footage in his private quarters, his multiple eyes focused on different angles simultaneously. He watched as humans shared their food with hungry Vrethani children. He saw them carrying wounded civilians to safety. He observed them standing firm against impossible odds, not to capture territory, but to protect lives. "This is unprecedented," he murmured to himself. His aide, a young Mithrani officer named Kelix, stood nearby. "The humans are strange, Commander. They fight like demons, but then they show mercy to the enemy. I do not understand them." Xylox was silent for a moment. "Neither do I, Kelix, but I think I am beginning to." He pulled up the psychological profiles that the Council had compiled on the human species. They came from a world where survival was a constant struggle. Their planet was filled with predators, parasites, and environmental hazards that would overwhelm most species. They had evolved to fight, to endure, to survive against all odds. But they had also evolved something else, something the Council's scientists called empathy. The ability to feel what others felt, to understand their pain, their fear, their hopes. It was a trait that made them more dangerous in battle because they could predict enemy behavior, but it also made them more human. Xylox closed the files and stood up. "Prepare a message for the Council High Command. I believe we have underestimated our new allies, and I believe the Vrethani have made a grave mistake." On Thuris Prime, the situation was growing more complicated. The human forces had successfully secured the eastern industrial sector, but the presence of 300 Vrethani civilians was creating problems. Command was demanding that the civilians be processed and interrogated. Some officers in the main force wanted to use them as hostages or bargaining chips. Lieutenant Park refused. He stood in the communication room of their makeshift headquarters, facing a holographic image of General Morrison, the commander of all human forces in the sector. Morrison was a hard man, a veteran of a dozen campaigns. His face was lined with years of war and difficult decisions. "Lieutenant, I understand your position," Morrison said, his voice crackling through the transmission. "But we have protocols for a reason. Those civilians might have information that could save Council lives. With respect, General, they're factory workers and families. They don't know anything about military operations. Interrogating them would be a waste of resources and a violation of everything we stand for." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Everything we stand for. We're at war, Lieutenant. The Vrethani have killed millions. They tortured our people on Kalos Station. They don't deserve our mercy." Park stood firm. "Those soldiers don't deserve our mercy, General, but these are civilians, children. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't torture anyone. If we start treating innocents like enemies, then what exactly are we fighting for?" The general was silent for a long moment. On his end of the transmission, Park could see him rubbing his temples, a gesture of frustration and exhaustion. "You're putting me in a difficult position, Lieutenant." "I know, sir, and I'm sorry, but I can't in good conscience hand these people over to be mistreated. It's not who we are." Morrison sighed. "No, I suppose it's not." He paused, then continued. "All right, Lieutenant, you win, for now. Keep the civilians safe, but I want regular reports and I want to know immediately if anything changes." "Yes, sir, thank you, sir." The transmission ended, and Park allowed himself a small breath of relief. He had bought them time, but he knew the situation couldn't last forever. Outside, Sergeant Major Rodriguez was supervising the distribution of supplies. The Vrethani civilians had begun to relax somewhat, though they still watched the humans with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The language barrier was a significant problem. The translation software could handle basic communication, but nuance and emotion were difficult to convey. One of the Vrethani children, a small creature with large eyes and delicate features, had become fascinated with Private Chen. Chen was good with kids. He had 3 younger siblings back on Earth, and he had been showing the child simple tricks and games whenever he had a moment free. Rodriguez watched the interaction with a complex mix of emotions. In another situation, Chen might be shooting at this child's parents. The absurdity and tragedy of war had never been more clear. "Sergeant Major," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the company's medical officer. She was a small woman with tired eyes and steady hands. "What is it, Doc?" Tanaka gestured toward the medical station she had set up. "I've been treating the civilians. Some of them have pre-existing conditions that need attention, chronic illnesses, that sort of thing, but I'm running low on supplies." "Can you make do?" "For now, but if we're here much longer, I'll need a resupply." She paused. "There's something else. One of the females is pregnant, near term from what I can tell. If she gives birth while we're here, things could get complicated." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Keep me informed. I'll talk to the lieutenant about getting more supplies." "There's something else," Tanaka said, lowering her voice. "The civilians are starting to trust us. I can see it in their body language, their interactions. They expected us to hurt them and we didn't. Some of them are actually grateful." "That's good, isn't it?" "Yes and no. It's good because it makes things easier for everyone, but it also means they're starting to see us as protectors. What happens when we have to leave, when the main force takes over?" It was a question Rodriguez didn't have an answer for. Later that day, the first real communication breakthrough happened. One of the Vrethani adults, an older male with graying skin and intelligent eyes, approached Lieutenant Park through the translation software. His name, as best as the software could render it, was Thuron. "Why do you help us?" Thuron asked, his voice carrying the strange harmonics of Vrethani speech. "We are your enemies. Our soldiers have killed your people. Why do you not take revenge?" Park considered the question carefully. "We don't take revenge on innocents. That's not who we are. But we would do the same to you. Our soldiers have done terrible things to your prisoners." "I know," Park said. "I've seen the recordings, but that's their choice. This is ours. We choose to be better." Thuron was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that the translation software struggled to process. When it finally rendered the words, Park felt a chill run down his spine. "In our language, we have a word for warriors who protect the helpless, even their enemies. We call them Veltharak. It means those who walk with honor. We thought such warriors only existed in our ancient legends. We did not think we would ever meet them." Park didn't know how to respond, so he simply nodded and said, "We're just soldiers, Thuron. We're just trying to do what's right." "That," Thuron replied, "is exactly what makes you Veltharak." The word began to spread among the civilians. The humans were Veltharak, the legendary warriors, the ones who walked with honor. The children began to look at the human soldiers with something other than fear, something that looked almost like wonder. And in the darkness outside the sector, the Vrethani military was preparing for another assault. They had received reports of the civilians' survival. They knew that the humans were protecting them, and they were confused. In the command tent of the Vrethani assault force, General Kethros reviewed the intelligence reports with growing unease. He had fought many battles in his long career. He had faced many enemies, but he had never faced an enemy like this. "They are feeding our people," one of his officers reported. treating their injuries, caring for the children. It makes no sense." "It's a trick," another officer insisted. "They want to gain our trust, then use the civilians against us." "To what end?" Kethros asked. "They already control the sector. They have no need for tricks." "Then what are they doing?" Kethros looked at the images captured by their reconnaissance drones. Human soldiers playing with Vrethani children. Human medics treating Vrethani sick. Human officers speaking respectfully with Vrethani elders. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I intend to find out." He made a decision that would change everything. "Prepare a communication. I wish to speak with the human commander directly." The request for communication came as a surprise. Lieutenant Park stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "They want to talk," Sergeant Major Rodriguez asked, reading over his shoulder. "That's a first." "General Kethros commands the assault force," Park said slowly. "He's offering a temporary ceasefire to discuss the civilian situation." "Could be a trap." "Could be, but we won't know unless we talk to him." Park authorized the communication, and within the hour, a holographic image of General Kethros appeared in their makeshift command center. The Vrethani general was an imposing figure, even as a hologram, tall, heavily muscled, his stone-like skin marked with the scars of many battles. "Lieutenant Park," Kethros said, his voice deep and rumbling, "I have heard much about you and your soldiers." "General Kethros, your reputation precedes you as well." Kethros studied Park with his large, dark eyes. "You have our civilians, nearly 300 of them, workers, families, children." "We do." "And you have been protecting them, caring for them. Why?" Park took a breath. "Because they're not soldiers, they're not our enemies, they're just people caught in a war they didn't start." Kethros was silent for a moment. "Our intelligence suggested that humans were savage creatures, monsters from a death world. We expected you to slaughter the civilians as an example to us." "Your intelligence was wrong." "Yes, I am beginning to understand that." Kethros paused, and when he spoke again, there was something different in his voice, something that sounded almost like respect. "I have served in the military for 40 cycles. I have fought many wars against many species. I have never seen warriors like you." "We're just soldiers," Park said. "We do our job." "No," Kethros shook his head slowly. "You are more than that. You are Veltharak. Our people speak of such warriors in our oldest stories, but we thought they were myths. You have proven that they are real." Park felt the weight of the general's words. "What are you proposing, General?" Kethros straightened. "I am proposing a temporary ceasefire. I will withdraw my forces from the sector. In return, you will allow me to evacuate the civilians to safety." "And after the evacuation?" "After," Kethros's expression was unreadable. "After, we will speak again. There is much to discuss." Park looked at Rodriguez, who shrugged slightly. It was an unexpected development, but not an unwelcome one. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," Park said, "but I'm willing to recommend the ceasefire." "That is all I ask." Kethros nodded formally. "We will speak again, Lieutenant Park. May your stars guide you." The transmission ended, and Park immediately contacted General Morrison. The conversation that followed was long and heated. Morrison was skeptical of the ceasefire, suspicious of Vrethani intentions. But in the end, he agreed to allow it, if only to spare human lives in another bloody assault. The ceasefire was announced the following morning. Vrethani transport ships descended from orbit, landing in the industrial sector under the watchful eyes of human soldiers. The evacuation was slow and careful, with both sides maintaining a wary respect. Thuron, the elder who had first called the humans Veltharak, approached Park before boarding the transport. "Thank you, Lieutenant," he said through the translator. "You have given us a gift beyond measure. You have shown us that honor still exists in this galaxy. Take care of yourself, Thuron, and your people." Thuron nodded. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out with one of his 4 arms and touched Park's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect in Vrethani culture. "I will tell our people what you have done here," Thuron said. "I will tell them about the humans, the Velthorak. Perhaps it will help end this war. Perhaps it will help us find a better way." "I hope so," Park said quietly. "I really hope so." The last of the civilians boarded the transports, and the ships lifted off, disappearing into the sky. The sector was quiet now, empty except for the human soldiers who had held it against all odds. Rodriguez stood beside Park, watching the ships vanish into the clouds. "You think it'll make a difference?" she asked. "I don't know," Park admitted. "But we did the right thing. That has to count for something." "It does," Rodriguez said. "It counts for a lot." In the days that followed, word of the Thuris Prime incident spread across both sides of the conflict. The story of human soldiers protecting Vrethani civilians became the subject of intense discussion in the Galactic Council, in the Vrethani Empire, and in the countless worlds that watched the war from afar. On the Council side, opinions were mixed. Some praised the humans for their humanity and honor. Others criticized them for showing mercy to the enemy. Politicians debated the implications. Military strategists analyzed the tactical ramifications. But on the Vrethani side, something unexpected was happening. The story of the Velthorak had touched something deep in Vrethani culture. Their ancient legends spoke of warriors who protected the innocent, who held to a code of honor that transcended the brutality of war. For generations, these stories had been dismissed as myths, relics of a more idealistic age. And now the humans had proven them real. In cities across the Vrethani Empire, people began to question the war. They began to ask why they were fighting against warriors who would protect their children. They began to wonder if perhaps there was another way. The seeds of change had been planted, and they would grow. 6 months after the events on Thuris Prime, the war had entered a new phase. The fighting continued, brutal and costly, but something had shifted in the nature of the conflict. Both sides were talking, not just with weapons but with words. Commander Xylox had been appointed as the Council's chief negotiator. He had requested the assignment personally, after reviewing all the intelligence on the human actions at Thuris Prime. He believed that there was an opportunity for peace, if both sides were willing to take it. Across the table from him sat General Kethros, who had been appointed as the Vrethani Empire's lead negotiator. The irony was not lost on either of them, 2 military officers who had spent their careers fighting, now trying to build peace. "The situation is complex," Kethros said, his voice measured. "Our government is divided. There are those who wish to continue the war, who see the humans' mercy as weakness to be exploited, and there are those who have been moved by the story of the Velthorak. The Council faces similar divisions," Xylox admitted. "Many believe that we should press our advantage, that the humans' actions have given us a moral high ground we should use to crush the Empire once and for all." "And what do you believe, Commander?" Xylox was silent for a moment. "I believe that war is a failure of civilization. Every life lost is a tragedy. Every child orphaned is a wound that never fully heals. If there is a chance for peace, we must take it." Kethros nodded slowly. "I have come to believe the same. The humans have shown me something I had forgotten, that there is more to being a warrior than killing. There is honor, there is compassion, there is the protection of the innocent." "Then we are agreed. We will work toward peace." The negotiations were long and difficult. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. The humans played a crucial role. Their reputation for honor and fairness made them trusted mediators in disputes that would have deadlocked otherwise. Lieutenant Park, now promoted to captain, was assigned to the human delegation. He served as a liaison between the military and diplomatic sides of the negotiations, helping to bridge the gap between warriors and politicians. One day, during a break in the talks, General Kethros approached him. "Captain Park, I wish to speak with you privately." "Of course, General." Kethros led Park to a quiet corner of the conference building. "I have been thinking about what you said on Thuris Prime, about choosing to be better, about not taking revenge on the innocent." "I remember. I have served in the military for over 40 cycles," Kethros said. "I have done things that I am not proud of, things that I justified as necessary for victory. But after Thuris Prime, I began to question those justifications." He paused, his expression heavy with thought. "I have seen records of what our forces did on Kalos Station, the torture of human prisoners, the brutal treatment. At the time, I told myself it was war. I told myself the humans would do the same to us." "But we didn't," Park said quietly. "No, you didn't, and that has forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself and my people." Kethros met Park's eyes. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not sure I deserve it, but I wanted you to know that your actions have changed me. They have changed many of us." Park considered his words carefully. "General, I can't speak for everyone who suffered at Vrethani hands. I can't forgive on their behalf, but I can tell you this. I believe people can change. I believe cultures can change. The fact that you're here working for peace proves that." "Thank you, Captain." Kethros's voice was rough with emotion. "I will try to be worthy of your faith." Months turned into years. The war did not end immediately. Too much blood had been shed, too much hatred built up. But the negotiations continued, and gradually the fighting decreased. Ceasefires became truces. Truces became armistices. And finally, after 3 long years, a peace treaty was signed. The ceremony was held on a neutral world, witnessed by representatives from every species in the Galactic Council and the Vrethani Empire. It was a historic moment, the end of a conflict that had claimed millions of lives and devastated countless worlds. Captain Park stood among the human delegation, wearing his dress uniform, watching as the leaders of both sides signed the treaty. Beside him was Sergeant Major Rodriguez, also promoted and decorated for her service. Many of the soldiers who had fought on Thuris Prime were present, honored guests at the ceremony. After the signing, there was a reception. Diplomats and officers mingled, speaking of the future of reconstruction, of the hope for lasting peace. It was strange, Park thought, to see Vrethani and council species standing together, talking and even laughing after so many years of war. General Kethros approached him, accompanied by an older Vrethani civilian. It took Park a moment to recognize him. "Thuron." The elder smiled, or made the Vrethani expression that served the same purpose. "Captain Park, I hoped I would see you again." "You're here for the ceremony." "I am here as a representative of the civilian coalition," Thuron explained. "After Thuris Prime, many of us began organizing. We demanded that our government pursue peace. We used the story of the Velthorak to build a movement." Park was stunned. "You did that?" "We did, and now here we are." Thuron gestured at the crowded reception hall. "Peace, after 17 cycles of war, and it began with you and your soldiers protecting our children." Park shook his head slowly. "We just did what was right." "Yes," Thuron said, "and that is exactly the point." General Kethros spoke up. "There is something else. The Vrethani government has decided to create a new award, the highest honor our military can bestow. It is called the Medal of the Velthorak, and we wish to present the first ones to the human soldiers who served on Thuris Prime." Park was speechless. Rodriguez, standing beside him, let out a quiet breath of surprise. "We are not asking you to forget the past," Kethros continued. "We are not asking for forgiveness for the terrible things our people have done, but we wish to honor those who showed us a better way, those who reminded us what true warriors can be." The ceremony was held the next day. One by one, the soldiers of Bravo Company received the Medal of the Velthorak from General Kethros himself. Private Chen, now a corporal, Corporal Okonkwo, now a sergeant, Dr. Tanaka, Sergeant Major Rodriguez, Captain Park. As Kethros pinned the medal to Park's chest, he spoke quietly. "You have changed the course of history, Captain. You and your soldiers. Because of you, millions of lives will be saved. Because of you, our children will grow up in peace." Park looked at the medal, a small piece of metal inscribed with Vrethani symbols he couldn't read. Such a small thing to represent something so large. "Thank you, General," he said, "but the real credit goes to my soldiers. They're the ones who chose to help, who chose to protect. I just gave them permission to be who they already were." Kethros smiled. "And that, Captain, is what makes you a true leader." 10 years after the peace treaty, the galaxy had changed in ways that few could have predicted. The Galactic Council and the Vrethani Empire had not just ended their war. They had formed an unprecedented alliance, bound together by shared experience and mutual respect. At the heart of this alliance was a single story, repeated countless times in history books and classrooms across both civilizations. The story of a small band of human soldiers who had protected enemy civilians, earning the respect of their former enemies and lighting a spark that would ignite a movement for peace. Colonel Elena Rodriguez, now Colonel Rodriguez, stood at the memorial that had been built on Thuris Prime. The industrial sector where Bravo Company had made its stand had been preserved as a historic site. A massive monument had been erected in the central square, depicting human soldiers and Vrethani civilians standing together under a symbolic representation of peace. She was not alone. Beside her stood former General Kethros, now retired and serving as an ambassador for cultural exchange. And scattered throughout the crowd of visitors were faces she recognized, former soldiers, former civilians, and the children who had grown up hearing the story of the Velthorak. "It's strange," Rodriguez said quietly, "standing here remembering." "Does it feel like a lifetime ago?" Kethros asked. "It feels like yesterday. I can still smell the smoke, hear the gunfire, see those children hiding in the community center." Kethros nodded slowly. "I can still remember watching the drone footage, trying to understand why your soldiers were giving food to our people. It made no sense to me then. And now? Now it is the only thing that makes sense." Kethros gestured at the monument, at the crowd of visitors from both species. "This is what we built together, not with weapons but with compassion." A young Vrethani approached them, a female with delicate features and bright, curious eyes. Rodriguez recognized her immediately. "Sathiri, is that you?" The young female nodded, smiling. "You remember me." "Of course I remember you. You were hiding behind your mother when we found you in the community center." Sathiri's eyes glistened. "I was so scared. I thought you were going to kill us. My mother was trying to protect me, but she was shaking with fear." "I remember," Rodriguez said softly. "But then you gave me food. You showed me a picture of your family on your device. You made funny faces to make me stop crying." Sathiri's voice broke slightly. "You saved my life. You saved all of us." Rodriguez didn't know what to say. The weight of 10 years of history pressed down on her, all the sacrifices and struggles and moments of doubt. And here, standing before her, was the living proof that it had all been worth it. "I'm a teacher now," Sathiri continued. "I teach the history of the war and the peace that followed. I tell my students about the Velthorak, about the human soldiers who chose to protect instead of destroy." "What do they think of the story?" "They think it's amazing. They can't believe that warriors would do such a thing," Sathiri smiled. "But I was there. I know it's true. And I tell them that if such warriors can exist, then perhaps we can all be better than we think we are." Rodriguez felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She had spent a decade questioning whether she had done the right thing, whether the peace would last, whether any of it had mattered. And now she knew. "Thank you, Sathiri," she said. "Thank you for telling me that." Later that evening, there was a ceremony at the memorial. Representatives from the Galactic Council and the Vrethani Alliance spoke about the significance of the site, about the lessons of the war, about the hope for the future. Then Colonel Rodriguez was invited to speak. She stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. She saw human faces and Vrethani faces. She saw young people who had never known war and old people who remembered it all too well. She saw soldiers and civilians, leaders and workers, parents and children. 10 years ago, she began, I was a soldier. I followed orders, I fought battles, I tried to stay alive and keep my people alive. I didn't think about making history. I didn't think about changing the galaxy. I just thought about getting through each day. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When we found those civilians in the community center, we faced a choice. We could have ignored them, let them fend for themselves. We could have treated them as enemies, as bargaining chips, as collateral. That's what war usually demands. But we didn't. We chose a different path, not because we were ordered to, not because it was strategically smart, but because it was right. She looked at the faces in the crowd, at the hope and attention in their eyes. I've been asked many times why we made that choice. What made us different from other soldiers, other warriors? And the truth is, I don't think we were different. I think we were the same as everyone else, facing the same fears, the same hatred, the same temptations. But we remembered something. We remembered that the people in front of us were not just enemies. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, individuals with hopes and fears and dreams just like our own. We remembered that war is about more than victory. It's about what kind of people we become in the process. And we chose to become the kind of people who protect the innocent, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense, even when every instinct is screaming at us to do otherwise. She took a breath. That's what I want you to remember from this story. Not that we were heroes, not that we were special, but that ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances can still choose to do what's right. And when we make that choice, when we refuse to let war turn us into monsters, we change the world. We change the galaxy. She stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause. Humans and Vrethani stood together, united in their appreciation for the lesson that had been taught on this ground 10 years before. As Rodriguez rejoined her colleagues, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Captain, now Major, Park, gray at the temples now but still with the same steady eyes. "Good speech," he said. "You think so?" "I know so." Park looked out at the crowd, at the monument, at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "You know, when we made that decision on Thuris Prime, I had no idea it would lead to all this. I just knew it was the right thing to do." "That's usually how it works," Rodriguez said. "You do what's right and you hope for the best. And sometimes the best actually happens." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ceremony continue, watching the two species that had once been mortal enemies now standing together as friends. "You know what I think about sometimes," Rodriguez said. "What?" "Those kids, the ones we protected, they're grown up now. Some of them have their own kids, and their kids will never know war. They'll grow up in peace because of what we did." Park nodded slowly. "That's a good legacy." "It's the only legacy that matters." Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy at peace. A peace built not on treaties or alliances, but on a simple truth that a handful of human soldiers had demonstrated on a battlefield 10 years before. That true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to protect. That honor is not about victory, but about how you treat those who cannot fight back. That the greatest warriors are not those who kill without mercy, but those who show mercy even to their enemies. The Deathworld warriors had come from a planet that tried to kill them every day. They had evolved to fight, to survive, to endure. But they had also evolved something that made them unique in the galaxy, the capacity for compassion, even in the midst of war. And that, more than all their strength and skill and ferocity, was what had earned them the respect of the galaxy. They were Velthorak. They were human. And they had changed everything.